My daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Why should I leave?" She was dead certain this house would be hers one day, and that I wouldn't lift a finger to stop her. I didn't argue. No explanations. No extra warnings. The next morning, I had 45 missed calls on my phone. But by then, it was already too late. Everything she'd been counting on wasn't hers anymore. 45 missed calls. My phone screen kept lighting up, but I just sat there on the balcony sipping my coffee nice and slow. The whole mess didn't start that morning. It had been building for months, right in my own hallway. My name's Marta. I'm 68, and I've been a widow for 5 years. After my husband passed, it seemed like a smart move to let my son Ryan and his wife, Brooke, move into the upstairs unit of my duplex. They'd save on rent, and I'd have a little company. That was the idea anyway. In reality, the line of what was mine started blurring almost every single day. It started small. First, Brooke's Amazon boxes piled up and blocked the entryway. Then she dug up my favorite hydrangeas in the backyard without asking, because she decided they looked dated. I'm not the type to start fights over every little thing. I watch. I read the room. But I won't put up with disrespect. The first real turning point came on a Tuesday. I got back from the grocery store and found the shared laundry room completely rearranged. My washer had been shoved into the darkest corner, while Brooke's fancy new oversized machine took center stage. My laundry baskets were dumped on the damp floor. I didn't call for Ryan. I didn't call for Brooke. I quietly put my baskets back on the shelf, slid my washer back to its proper spot with the right hookups, and unplugged her hoses that were snaking all over the place. That evening, when Brooke got home, I heard her heavy footsteps pounding down the stairs. She burst into my kitchen without knocking. "Why did you unplug my washer?" she snapped, using that tone people save for kids. Because it was blocking my hookup, I answered calmly, still putting away groceries. "Ryan and I need more space for laundry." "You're just one person," she shot back. "That doesn't change who owns the basement." "Brooke," I said, looking her right in the eyes. "It's mine. Good evening." I left her standing there in the kitchen. Brooke didn't take my clear boundary as a lesson. She took it as the start of a quiet war. From then on, she stopped seeing the house as our shared home and started treating it like her future property, with me just tolerated in it for now. Ryan, my son, had always been the kind of guy who took the path of least resistance. If Brooke complained, he nodded along. If I brought it up, he'd stare at the floor and mumble something about compromise. But there were no real compromises, just slow, creeping takeovers. A week after the laundry room incident, I noticed the storage closet on the ground floor. My storage closet suddenly crammed with Brooke's stuff. Boxes of expensive decor suitcases and piles of shoes stacked right in front of my shelves. She hadn't even asked. She'd just claimed the space. I didn't waste time on long talks or accusations. The next morning, while they were both at work, I neatly moved every box and pair of shoes out and stacked them right outside their upstairs door. Then I drove to the hardware store, bought a heavy-duty padlock and a new deadbolt for the wooden door. Within an hour, it was installed. My jams, my supplies, and my tools were safe again. When they got home that afternoon, I heard a muffled yelp in the stairwell. A few minutes later, Ryan was at my door, looking miserable. "Mom, did you really have to put Brooke's things out in the hall? And why's there a lock on the closet now?" he asked quietly. "Because it's my closet, Ryan," I said, kneading bread dough. "I'm not your storage unit. If you need more room, organize your own space better. But we're family," he tried. "Family respects each other's personal space." "Brooke doesn't," I replied matter-of-factly. Ryan sighed and headed back upstairs. He knew I was right. And I knew Brooke would make his evening hell. But that wasn't my problem. My door stayed locked. The vibe in the house got noticeably colder after that. Brooke barely spoke to me, and when she did, it was short commands like she was already running the place. I let her believe it, focusing on my garden and my friends instead. Then she crossed a line I couldn't ignore: my money. We had a joint household account for shared bills like utilities. As the owner, I covered most of it, thinking I was helping the kids get a solid start in married life. End of the month. I checked my statements and saw a charge for nearly $1,200 deposit for premium patio furniture. Brooke had used the joint account for her personal luxury splurge. I called the bank right away. No tears, no blow-up. I was crystal clear. I canceled the joint authorization, set up new automatic payments only for my own meters, reduced the shared account to a bare minimum, and had my card blocked. That evening, Brooke knocked on my door, phone in hand, face flushed with anger. The payment for my furniture bounced. The bank says the account doesn't have enough. "Did you forget your transfer?" she demanded. "No," I said, wiping my hands on a towel. "I permanently stopped my contributions to that account. From now on, I only pay my own utilities. How you cover your share and your furniture is on you two. You can't do that. The house is family property. We're supposed to share the load," she yelled. "The house is mine, Brooke, not the family's. And my money is mine too. Using it for your patio set is basically theft." "I'm not funding it," I said evenly. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. For the first time, she realized the tap wasn't endless. "Ryan's going to hear about this," she threatened. "Please do," I said, closing the door slowly but firmly. The crack in the relationship was impossible to miss now. The weeks after the account mess were pure ice. Ryan avoided me, and Brooke acted like I was some annoying roommate who'd be gone soon. She started inviting friends over and throwing loud parties on the deck right above my bedroom. If I asked her to turn the music down after midnight, she'd just laugh. It was obvious she was trying to wear me down in my own home. She figured an older woman like me would eventually cave for the sake of peace. She didn't know me at all. I sat down at my desk and wrote a simple, straightforward letter. Not some fancy legal notice, just a clear termination of our informal living arrangement. I gave them a generous 3 months to find their own place. Reason, personal need, and irreconcilable differences in how the house was being used. I slipped it into an envelope and dropped it in their mailbox. The next afternoon, Brooke came downstairs, waving the opened letter, laughing in a way that gave me chills, a condescending, victorious laugh. "Are you serious, Marta?" she said, flapping the paper. "You're actually trying to formally evict us. It's a notice to vacate." "Yes," I confirmed, quietly glancing up from my book. "Why should I go?" She shot back, hands on her hips. "This is your son's house. He's your only heir. We're staying. What are you gonna do? Call the cops? Put your own son out on the street? You're way too nice for that." I studied her smug face. She was so sure of her power. She thought family was a leash that would hold me forever. I said nothing, not one word. I just picked my book back up and turned the page. "See," she sneered. Nothing but empty threats. She turned and went upstairs. She didn't understand that my silence wasn't weakness. It was the moment I stopped hoping and started acting. Brooke figured the whole thing was over. To her, my letter had just been an emotional tantrum, a bluff she'd called successfully. Life went back to normal. Her loud music, Ryan looking away awkwardly. But while they lived upstairs, I quietly started rebuilding my life downstairs. I knew fighting to evict my own son would be messy and heartbreaking. I didn't need a war. I needed a clean solution. The following week, I drove across town to a small, discreet real estate office. I laid out the facts to the agent, Mr. Hayes. No drama, just the truth. I wanted to sell the house. Now. And I was also looking for a nice, modern one-bedroom apartment for myself, preferably with a balcony and no yard work. He got it immediately. "We have investors who buy properties even with tenants or occupants in place," he explained. "They handle all the legal and practical stuff with the current residents. You'd be completely out of it." That was exactly what I wanted. A few days later, I viewed a bright two-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood on the other side of town. It was perfect. I signed the lease on the spot. At home, I started packing in secret during the hours they were at work. My most treasured things, my books, the keepsakes from my husband, disappeared into boxes I stacked in my now-locked storage closet. When Brooke came home in the evenings, the living room looked perfectly normal. I kept my routines cooking, reading, tending the front garden. I didn't let on a thing. I felt calmer than I had in the last 5 years. The constant tension, the dread of the next rude move, it all lifted. I had taken control back not with fights, but with preparation. Every packed box was a step toward freedom. Brooke thought she'd won the game. She had no idea I was already leaving the board. The house sold faster than I expected. Mr. Hayes brought an investor by one Saturday, while Ryan and Brooke were out on a day trip. The buyer was a no-nonsense businessman who saw the property's potential. He planned a full gut renovation and to turn it into upscale units. The fact that the upstairs was still occupied didn't bother him. "It's just business," he said, jotting notes on his tablet. The closing happened on a rainy Thursday. When I signed the papers, I didn't feel sadness, just deep relief. The house that had once been my dream had become a prison. Now I was free. The proceeds more than secured my retirement. I arranged with the new owner for official handover on the 1st of the next month, giving me 3 weeks. During those 3 weeks, I moved through the house like a ghost. Brooke's arrogance grew. She started leaving her dirty shoes deliberately in front of my door and using my backyard as a dumping spot for bulky trash. I quietly moved the shoes aside. I didn't get upset anymore. Every provocation bounced off an invisible wall of certainty. One evening, Ryan came downstairs, nervously scratching the back of his head. "Brooke wants to redo the upstairs kitchen," he started hesitantly. "We figured since the house will be mine eventually, maybe you could chip in on the costs." "As an investment." I looked at him for a long moment, my son. I wondered when he'd stopped thinking for himself. "No, Ryan," I said calmly. "I won't be contributing to your kitchen. And I strongly suggest you don't make any big investments right now." He frowned. "Why not?" "Because it's not smart to pour money into something you don't own," I answered, turning back to the stove. He didn't catch the hint. He shook his head and went back upstairs to Brooke. My warning went right over his head. My moving day was planned down to the minute. It was a Tuesday, the second to last day of the month. Ryan had an important meeting out of town and Brooke was at the office. The house was quiet when the small moving truck pulled into the driveway at 8 sharp. 2 strong guys started carrying out my packed boxes and the few pieces of furniture I'd chosen to keep. I left most of the old stuff behind. It didn't fit my new life anyway. And it was part of the deal with the buyer who planned to gut everything. In 3 hours, my ground floor unit was empty. Bare walls, swept floors. The space suddenly looked huge and strange. It didn't feel like home anymore, just a shell. Before I left for the last time, I walked into the shared hallway and placed a simple black folder on the little console table by the front door, right under Brooke's expensive mirror. Inside was a copy of the new deed showing the ownership change, plus an official letter from the new owner addressed to Ryan and Brooke. It wasn't an eviction notice. It was a straightforward business announcement: major renovation work on the ground floor and exterior would begin at 7 a.m. the following Monday. There was also a new lease offer at current market rates. If they didn't sign, they'd have to move out. I added no personal note, no explanations, no accusations. Everything that needed saying was in those official documents. I locked the front door from the outside and dropped my key in the new owner's mailbox for him to pick up later. As I got in my car and started the engine, I didn't look in the rearview mirror once. I drove across town to my new apartment. It smelled of fresh paint. My favorite armchair was already by the window, overlooking distant trees. I made a cup of tea and soaked in the pure, uninterrupted silence. My new life had officially begun. The first night in my new place was a revelation. I slept deeply without waking to slamming doors or heavy footsteps overhead. No more waiting for respect that was never coming. Wednesday morning dawned sunny. I sat on my new balcony, drinking coffee and watching the city wake up below. I knew exactly what was happening on the other side of town right then. The new owner didn't waste time. His crew showed up right on schedule. At exactly 7 a.m., 2 white work vans pulled into the driveway of my old house. I could picture it clearly, guys in work gear hauling heavy tools into the ground floor that now belonged to them. The sound of drills and sledgehammers would rip through the quiet neighborhood. My phone sat on the little table next to my coffee mug screen, dark. I figured it would start ringing soon. Brooke wasn't a morning person. The construction noise right under her bedroom would drag her out of bed. She'd probably storm downstairs in her pajamas, ready to blame me for the disturbance and give me an earful. Instead, she'd walk into an empty ground floor, see workers already ripping out the hardwood, and face a foreman who had zero patience for her attitude. Then on her way back upstairs, she'd spot the black folder on the console table. At 7:15, my phone screen lit up for the first time. Brooke in big letters. It buzzed silently on the table. I wrapped both hands around my warm mug and just looked at it. I thought back to the day she'd laughed and said, "Why should I go?" I didn't smile with spite. I didn't feel any urge for revenge. I just felt a deep, peaceful indifference. The phone stopped ringing. 5 seconds later, it started again. I leaned back and took a slow, deep breath. 45 missed calls. From 7:15 to 9 a.m., Brooke called nonstop. In between, 3 calls from Ryan he must have phoned on his way to the meeting. When the ringing finally stopped, the texts started pouring in. The first one was demanding, "Where are you? What are these guys doing downstairs? Answer me, right now." The second 20 minutes later sounded panicked. "Marta, did you sell the house? Are you crazy? What are we supposed to do now?" The last one was from Ryan. "Mom, please pick up. The new owner wants way higher rent. We can't afford it." I read them calmly while arranging my new hydrangeas on the balcony. They'd grow beautifully here, with no one calling them outdated and ripping them out. Around 10 o'clock, I picked up my phone. I didn't write a long explanation. I didn't defend myself. I typed one short message to Ryan. That letter I sent a few weeks ago was serious. The house now belongs to the real estate company. Handle everything else with them. I need some space right now. Please don't contact me for the next few weeks. I hit send and turned my phone completely off for the rest of the day. The image of Brooke standing in the apartment surrounded by construction noise, facing a no-nonsense new owner and a lease she couldn't afford it, had all become real. She had demanded the space. Now she had it, but on the terms of the real world, where there was no more easygoing mother-in-law willing to put up with her moods. I didn't need lawyers or court dates. I simply did the one thing in my power. I sold what was mine and removed myself from the equation. The situation they were in now wasn't something I created. It came from their own arrogance and the firm belief that consequences only happen to other people. The weeks after I moved out were wonderfully peaceful. I settled into my new routine walks in the nearby park, coffee with friends, and the simple joy of a tidy, quiet home. The old house started to feel like something from another lifetime. Almost 2 months later, Ryan showed up at my new apartment door. He looked exhausted, shoulders slumped. I invited him in and made fresh coffee just like old times. He sat at my little kitchen table and glanced around. "You've made it really nice," he said softly. I nodded and set the cup in front of him. "We moved out," he said after a while, staring into the steam. We couldn't swing the new rent, and the construction noise was unbearable. We're in a small 2-bedroom out on the edge of town now. Brooke is. She's really angry. Anger's a tiring emotion, I replied neutrally. But she'll learn to deal with it. He looked at me, searching for the old soft-hearted mom who always fixed everything. "Why did you do it, Mom?" Without saying a word. "I did say something, Ryan." I answered calmly, holding his gaze. "I made my boundaries very clear. You both chose to ignore them. I just followed through on the consequences of your choices." He stayed quiet. He knew it was true. He finished his coffee and stood up slowly. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask if they could move in with me. My space was mine now, untouchable. We said goodbye at the door. It wasn't some tearful movie scene or dramatic reconciliation. It was just honest. When the door closed behind him, I turned the lock. I walked back out to my balcony and looked up at the clear sky. No more constant irritation. No more heavy footsteps overhead. Just me, my freedom, and the deep certainty that my life finally belonged to me again. 45 missed calls had been the price. It was worth every single penny. Sometimes silence isn't giving in. It's the moment you stop hoping others will change and start changing the game by your own rules.